Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This will be recorded, and we'll be sharing that out after today in an email. Please feel free to share it with friends and family. So we're super grateful to have Sally and Allie here from our Captain Cadre, talking about 10 tips for surviving the busy holidays. So I'm going to turn it over to you, ladies. Thank you.
Hi, we are very excited to have this topic today. It is 10 tips for surviving the busy holidays, and our goal for this training is to give strategies and ideas that will support autistic children. But we often say that while what works for all children might not be best for autistic children, what works for autistic children often works for all. So these tips are likely to support a happier holiday for all families. Excellent. And Sally and I are your presenters today. We are the current SLO cadre members of Captain. We are both BCBAs. I work at Paso and Sally is at Templeton. And what is Captain? So Captain is the California Autism Professional Training and Information Network. And Captain works to improve implementation of evidence-based practices with fidelity in schools and community settings through high-quality training, coaching, and systems level support. So we are providing this training to support families as Captain representatives today. Next slide. Our purpose today is to give you practical strategies based on evidence-based practices that you can use to create a plan to use across situations and environments that will help reduce stress and anxiety for your child and hopefully yourself. We know that holidays can be a challenging time for all families, and that it can be especially challenging for our families that have students or children with autism. When you have time away from school and routine, when you have disruptions in your schedule and time spent with lots of people, it can be really hard and overwhelming. So we want to just really focus that even with work to support so that things can go more smoothly, there are likely to be bumps in a road. And really just wanting all families and all parents to accept that this will happen, and it's okay if every moment is not picture perfect. That really a lot of what we're going to talk about is being proactive, implementing strategies, but also being flexible so that your family can navigate the holidays in a way that you can celebrate what works best for you and your kids. Okay, today the strategies that we're going to focus on fall under the evidence-based practices of visual supports, reinforcement, priming, and environmental arrangement. And we're going to get into these topics more specifically as we go through the strategies that we've selected today. But when we're talking about visual supports, we're going to focus on using a visual schedule, but there are a lot of other ways that we can use visuals to support having a more successful holiday season. We can use visuals to help our students know what to expect when we travel, when we're in other people's homes. We're going to talk about how to use reinforcement in our home setting, but again, that is another evidence-based practice that's really can be used across settings and is really important to use if your holiday does take you from house to house or you have some traveling involved in what you're doing. We're going to go over priming. And when we talk about priming, that's really a way to prepare our kids in advance, letting them know what to expect. If you are going to be in other people's houses or if you're traveling, are there different rules and expectation at that house that don't occur at your house? Is your day going to be different? Are there going to be things that are usually part of your routine that are going to look different during the unstructured holiday time? So the more we focus on priming and alerting our kids of what's going to be different and what they should expect each day, the better they're likely to do. And we're going to talk about use of environmental arrangement. So really just making sure that we have the environment set up in a way that's clear, that gives good information, and potentially that can be free of some of the lights, sounds, and decor that is part of what makes the holidays festive, but can also be really overwhelming to our kids, especially if our kids have some sensory sensitivities. Okay, next slide. So happy holidays start here. And we again want to just focus on, we're going to talk about preparing, planning, and then adjusting. So I know myself as a parent have found myself celebrating holidays with my family in a way where I have this idea or expectation of what's going to be really fun or a really great experience, and it just doesn't go to plan. Often we find ourselves kind of trying to scold or discipline our children to behave so that we can have fun with our family and do what we're supposed to be doing. And we really just want to focus on that it's okay to change. It's okay to adjust. It's okay to abort old traditions if they haven't worked well or if they don't fit for all members of your family, and then adjust and make new traditions or find things that are going to be more successful for your family. Really doing things that work well and that are fun for your entire family is really what's going to make you have that happy holiday season. Okay, so our first kind of practical support that we're going to talk about is use of a visual schedule and following routines. So a visual schedule is exactly what it sounds like. We want to have a schedule that shows our kids what to expect, what our day will look like, and for a lot of our kids, we're really going to want to highlight where we're going to have a change or a difference. The use of a visual schedule can really allow you to keep structure during what is inherently a much less structured time than typical school routine that our kids have. We can plan breaks for our kids, quiet time. We can build this into the visual schedule and let them know when to expect it. Visual schedules allow our child to know when transitions will occur and when planned fun will happen. It lets them know in a way that we can give them a little advance notice. We're about ready to end this, and you see what the next thing is going to be. One of the things that we really want to make sure for visual schedules to be really successful in the home setting is that it needs to be where your child can see it throughout the day. Sometimes this means that we need it posted in a large spot where the whole family can view it and use it. Sometimes that means that your child might need something individual that they can take with them space to space, or maybe both is what's going to work best for your student. If you are using a visual schedule, you also are going to want to bring it with you if you travel or if you visit other people's homes. A visual schedule can be a lot of different things. I think the most effective way to represent a visual schedule is to keep it overall pretty consistent. So you can even print out something where you have, kind of two columns. One column can be sort of time, or it can just list the activities: wake up, breakfast, get dressed, whatever is best for your student. And age of student is going to depend maybe which one you use. And then the other column is going to be what is on the schedule, right? So we might say 8 a.m. wake up, 8:30 eat breakfast. It often works really well to do, you can either laminate, or if you don't have a laminator, you can just write it on anything. It often makes sense to just rewrite it each day, keeping consistent what can be consistent, and then focusing on those areas of change. That brings us into routines. And the other thing that we want to incorporate with these visual schedules is to keep as many routines as consistent as possible. So if your child usually wakes up at 8, consider keeping 8 a.m. the wake up time, even though you might not have as many places to go or commitments to keep. Consider keeping meal times at a consistent time, and consider having foods that your child is used to having. Try to keep your bedtime routine as consistent as possible, and ideally have this routine on that visual schedule. Another aspect that can make a visual schedule more effective for our autistic children is incorporating both structure and leisure. So I think a lot of us can relate as parents to having too much free time or too much just do whatever you want time with our kids can actually be an antecedent for some of those problem behaviors that we're trying to avoid. And one way to avoid that is by having both structured time and unstructured time. So some of the ways that you can structure time is do some school type activities. Even though our kids don't always say that they love school, they often love the consistency of knowing what's expected. School activities can be very closed-ended, which often works well for our kids. You can also target social skills. You can also have times where you're going to plan to play games or do a cooperative activity like making cookies and really focus on building skills within that activity. Even though we're focusing on visual schedule, like I said before, other visuals can be really helpful ways to make your holidays more successful. You could use visuals in a teaching story to help your child understand gift giving and gift receiving. You can use pictures of family members that maybe you don't see often so that your child knows who they are and who to expect when they're visiting or engaging with different relatives. Next slide.
Allie, there was a quick question.
Yeah.
Any good examples of a visual schedule, like a calendar printout? I have a hard time representing time sometimes. My kiddo is a teen, age 13.
Yeah, and I think you can, sometimes it is really hard to represent time. I think sometimes what works best is just order of things, right? So you don't always have to have like, oh, that this is going to start at this time. Sometimes a visual schedule can just be effective in that it lists what's going to happen in the day and the order of things. It gives you a little bit more flexibility of like, hey, I thought this was going to take an hour, but it took a half hour. It could be something, you could print something, or you can really it can be homemade. The important part is just keep it consistent. You can grab just a lined paper and just write out for your child or your teenager what your day is going to look like. So the next tip that we're going to go over is incorporating choices. And one of the ways that we can use choice is in kind of planning and building that visual schedule. So maybe you think about that you do want to have a few outings, or you do want to have some events that you go to as a family with your children over the unstructured break. That could be a time that you include choice and you involve your child in the planning of that. It's also helpful to allow your child to potentially choose some of the activities that you build into their day, even when you're staying at home. You can use a choice of possible activities to help your child fill free time or leisure time. If there is going to be some time where maybe you as a parent are focusing on cooking the turkey and the rest of your kids are going to have some free time, maybe your autistic child needs a little bit of support there, and you can use some choice of, here are 4 things that you can do to fill this leisure or downtime. Choice can also help with transitions, right? Especially maybe when we're moving from something that's really fun or preferred to something that's less fun. You're leaving something they don't want to leave. Choice can really help. So you can let them know, that they can choose the way that they leave, or they can choose the amount of minutes that are left. You can also pair that with a transition object, and there can be choice involved in that. And this kind of idea of choice can be especially important when you're not at your own home. So if you do have a holiday season that is going to be a lot of times spent with relatives at other people's houses, or you're going to engage in some significant traveling, choice can be really important. We're in the car. Do you want to sit here or here? We're flying on an airplane. Do you want this blanket or this blanket? So giving some control within the things that you already have planned and are doing can be a really effective way to support your students and help them decrease those chances for problem behaviors. Next slide. And again, I spoke a little bit about this before, but reinforcement is a really important way that we support our students in these unstructured times and when we're in the home setting. So one of the ways that we can use reinforcement is to support engagement in the expected behaviors. So if your child has a reinforcement system that works well at school, you might want to use something similar for your break time. Often these reinforcement systems that are working well at school really just highlight and use repetition for those expected behaviors. Maybe it's, having safe hands. Maybe it's using words. Maybe it's remaining in an expected area. It's usually going to be some of those just generally expected behaviors that we need our kids to engage in. And when they do, then they have something reinforcing occur. So it could be, you could use a token board. And again, I would really consider using what's working at school if something is being used at school. So if your child has a token system where they earn stars for engage each time they show engagement in these expected behaviors, you could replicate that at home. Maybe they have a midday and end of day check-in, and if they've maintained for a certain amount of time, then they get access to that reinforcement. And when we're talking about reinforcement, we're talking about something that we provide that increases the likelihood of those desired behaviors. So we really want to make sure that what we're using for reinforcement is not also the thing that we're giving for leisure and free time, right? What we're using for reinforcement really needs to be very specifically and contingently applied based on these behaviors that we're looking for. And again, that's why sometimes the choice in the visuals can be important, that, we have some things that you can have for free, for leisure, but we also have these really special things that you can earn as reinforcement. If you're going to incorporate building social skills or cooperation or even academic skills into your schedule, it's also really great if you reinforce those new skills that you're targeting. If turn taking is something, for example, that your child maybe shows emergence in but doesn't really have a strong skill set in, then reinforcement can be a way that we really build that skill when we have the opportunities. Maybe we do have a family game time built into our visual schedule, and our focus is really catching our student each time that they take a turn without prompting, and when they do that, they're earning a star or verbal praise, and then when they've earned enough or they've earned what we've set out for them, told them in advance they're going to earn, then they get that reinforcement. One thing that I want to highlight here too is often as parents, you're very reinforcing. So we really can think about ways that you as a parent can pair yourself with your student can often be really effective for reinforcement. So maybe some one-to-one time with you, or maybe you have some holiday books and you read those together when they've earned it for engaging in some desired new skill or for maintaining those expected behaviors. And then the last thing that we kind of want to cover in thinking about reinforcement is that gift giving and receiving can be something that's really challenging for a lot of kids. It can be especially challenging for our kiddos with autism. So one of the things that you can consider is maybe it makes more sense as a family for your child not to get a whole pile of gifts to unwrap all at once. And maybe some of what you do for reinforcing and kind of helping your student or your child engage consistently with expected behaviors over your break is consider that you have a certain amount of money or a certain amount of gifts that you buy. Maybe for some of your kids, it makes sense to spread those gifts out and not have them be all opened at once on one day or on one opportunity. And that can be a way that you kind of use the holidays and some holiday traditions to incorporate that reinforcement into what you're trying to build with your kids. Having a planned break space is a really good way to prepare our kids for success. There is a lot of sensory input and excitement in the holidays, and it's okay if your child needs time away from all this. If they have a usual place where they take a break or they go when they're overstimulated or they just need some time alone, it's best if you can kind of keep and maintain that space during the holidays. Sometimes that's not possible possible, right? Sometimes the holidays mean we have a lot of family that come and stay in our house. And that means that maybe your kids don't usually share a room, but now they're sharing a room, or there's other ways that your family setting is impacted because of the company that you have. If that's happening, another really effective way to support your student that might need this break space is to get creative with a space that you're using. I had a child that I worked with that had the parents had a really big walk-in closet, and when they had family, that was turned into the break space. So bean bags and blankets and other sensory tools were brought into this space. It was able to be really quiet, and it was able to stay kind of this spot for one particular child that needed it, where all of the extra people in the family were not likely to go and be in that space. You also are likely going to want to replicate that idea of a designated break space if you do go to other people's houses, or if you are traveling. You know, for a lot of us, being in other people's space and being around a lot of people can be really overwhelming in a lot of different ways. And again, if your child needs that time to get away from this and away from this stimulation, it's really great if you can find a way for them to have that at somebody else's house. That means planning ahead, probably checking in with friends or family that you're visiting to say, you know, hey, is there a space that my child can use if needed? It is also really effective if you incorporate some kind of calming item or visual that can cue them to go to the break spot. So if you are going to need to use this break space in somebody else's house or while you're traveling, if you have something, a stuffed animal or a fidget that is really helpful to your child, sometimes the presentation of that can really help them know that they need a break and can help them find that space that you've already planned out. If you're making this break space in your house and maybe it's not a totally separate space, consider decorations and other added stimulus in this break space. If possible, less is going to be more. There's a lot of added smells and sights and sounds in the holiday season, however you celebrate. So finding ways for your child to have a spot with less of that can be really, really impactful. Going to an outing or somebody else's house early, being one of the first ones there so that you can kind of plan and practice utilizing a break space before all of the excitement and commotion starts, can also be a really effective way to make sure this break space works as planned when you're outside of your house. Okay, next slide. All right, holiday decorations. I think a lot of us as adults really love holiday decorations. I really love holiday decorations at my house. But we really want to consider that for some of our kids and even for some of our family members, this can be a lot for a lot of different reasons. So really kind of think about what holiday decorations you have in your house. Think about holiday decorations that you'll see or encounter when you're traveling or visiting. And some of the considerations are that maybe you decorate little by little. That can really help some of our kids better tolerate and adapt to the decorations. You could start with one room of your house or one type of decoration and slowly add more. You can include your kids in this decorating with choice or even helping if they're willing. And some decorations might work better than others. So sometimes a tree or other large decorations might be challenging. Glass ornaments or even the smell of a real tree can be potentially an area of challenge for some of our kids. Whereas something like an advent calendar or countdowns to the holidays that you celebrate, those can often work well and kind of target some of those things that actually help your kids. So an advent calendar or countdown can really help your child know that there's a certain amount of days to get to the best day. You can incorporate small trinkets or treats that allow them to get a little bit as you count down to the day. Sometimes some of the traditions like the elf on the shelf or there's other different there's other different ways to incorporate something like that. Those can also be decorations that can be something that is fun and again helps your child make a little bit of structure and kind of have this consistent thing to expect. Allows you to have a tradition and a decoration that maybe works well for your whole family and can be a little bit easier for your child. That maybe struggles a little bit with decorations. When we get to the end of our presentation today, we do have some resources to share out. And one of the resources or some of the resources that we have do target this idea of the overstimulation that holiday sights and sounds and decorations can cause and how they can be sometimes stressful for especially our autistic kids. So there are sensory friendly Santa experiences. There's also other kind of resources for how to have holiday fun and activities for your family that can have just less of the overall decor and smell and sights and decorations.
Perfect. Thanks, Allie. It's my turn. So we're on to tip number 6, which is priming for changes. And as we go through these last 5 tips, there's going to be a little bit of overlap because a lot of these strategies, again, that we are talking about, they apply across kind of these categories. And there's definitely some universal themes that you'll hear. But there are a lot of changes that happen over the holidays, and some of them are big and some of them are small. But we do know that our kids with autism oftentimes have difficulty with significant changes in routine. Some family members do. I definitely like my routine, and big changes can be hard for me as well. So again, just thinking about your family and the needs of your family and trying to really prepare your child for those big changes that might occur. So changes in the daily schedule, changes in who's going to be at your house, changes in the types of activities that you might be doing as a family. It could be even something as small as like a change in where they might sit at the dinner table when you have extra guests at your home or you're going somewhere else for dinner. And so thinking about how you can support your child in preparing for those changes as much as possible to eliminate kind of that surprise factor or that unknown in the routine that can cause distress. And a great way to do this is using visual support. So like Allie talked about already, one idea is, if you have family members or friends that you're going to be seeing that you don't see on a regular basis, having a photo book that you can be going through, talking about those family members so their faces are familiar and your child knows their names potentially, before that visit happens. Pictures of places that you might be going. So if you are going to go to church or a holiday parade or something like that, that you have some visuals that you can expose your child to so they just have a sense of familiarity for where you're going to go. Maybe a schedule of special meals, right? There's a lot of different types of things that your family might eat over the holidays. And if you do have more of a sit down special meal or some sort of tradition, like you always have tamales on Christmas Day, that you are priming and preparing your child for that and letting them know when those special meals are going to be coming, so that they have an idea. And again, they're not expecting their normal Thursday night dinner and all of a sudden it's something completely different. And I would say, priming in advance is really helpful, but think about priming in advance to the extent that's helpful for your own child, because for some kids, priming too early can actually heighten distress or anxiety about something that's coming. If they do get, significantly worried or stressed about big changes, if you talk about it too much in advance, that can sometimes have the reverse effect, where then they kind of are just focused on that and is it today, and versus maybe letting them know an hour ahead of time, so they have advance notice, but it's not something that they're kind of stuck on or worried about for multiple days. So your child best. So just thinking about that, like kind of where is that window of time that's helpful for giving them that notice for those changes. So tip number 7 is to review expectations for events. So again, the holidays bring a lot of different types of activities or events that maybe aren't part of our daily or weekly routine as a family. Again, these might be holiday parties, they might be special meals, they might be, parades, or even, class parties at school. But things are typically a little bit different. So I would think ahead about those different events that you're going to be attending and what the specific expectations or norms are for that setting. And go over those with your child as explicitly as you can. So one of the tools, this is kind of an overlap of that connection between home and school, that in the schools, this is something that is done for all students through our positive behavior intervention and supports, where we want to make sure that all of our students and families and staff know what the expectations are on the campus or on the school setting. And so they use what we call a matrix that kind of outlines what those norms are for this setting. And so something similar, if you're going over to, a friend's house, what are the things that are maybe different in terms of expectations? Maybe it's a family who doesn't wear shoes inside of the house, and you guys wear shoes in your house. So letting your child know ahead of time, and maybe even practicing that when you go over to, Sarah's house, that we take our shoes off before we go in the door. And so setting them up for success in that way. So when you're thinking about those events to kind of help you maybe narrow down on what the expectations are, you can ask yourself some questions to kind of help prepare you interact with your child. So what voice volume is okay? If you're going to a church service, right, we're going to have a lower voice volume than if we're going to a Christmas party. And so making sure that that is explicitly talked about. And again, maybe using some visual supports to help capture this. So, a picture of church, and then we use a voice volume 0 or voice volume 1. We, sit in our seat until the service is done. We don't, eat or drink while we're in the service, things like that. So your child knows, will you be sitting or standing? How do you take a break? So like Ali talked about, being prepared for creating an alternate break space, we want to let our kids know in each of those settings, how can they access a break? So if you're somewhere where you're not supposed to talk, or you're supposed to talk quietly, if they're needing to get out of that setting to take a break, how do they let you know? Do you have a hand signal? Do you have a break card visual that you keep with you, and keep nearby in sight so they can just hand that to you? Do they just, tap you on the shoulder? Again, thinking about what those expectations are. You can ask yourself, will you be eating there? And if so, is the expectation that your child eats that food? So we talked about special meals, right? Holiday meals often incorporate different foods than we eat for our regular menu throughout the week. Is the expectation for your child that they try what's served? Will they have their, normal foods? Whatever your decision is 100% okay. Your family, you get to decide, but letting your kid know ahead of time. And also, this helps us as the adults not get kind of stuck in that like reactive decision-making mode where we want them to eat the special meal. We didn't talk about with them ahead of time. Then maybe your child refuses, and then you get kind of caught in this negotiation, or you find yourself saying, well, then no dessert, right? It just helps us as the grown-ups be prepared for what our plan is going to be for this event, and so that it's clear for you and your child. So just being on the same page can help us kind of slip into that sort of knee-jerk reaction, or feeling stuck, especially if you're in a public setting. Those situations can be really hard as a parent. Oftentimes, we maybe feel embarrassed, or we feel like we're not following through with maybe what our friends are having their kids do, and that can just cause some stress for us as the parents. So having those expectations set ahead of time will also be helpful for us. So number 8 is to role play travel or new events. As Ali mentioned, A lot of us might travel, and it may just be, across town or to a nearby family member's house. Some of us have more significant travel where we might be in the car for a few hours or even getting on a plane. But thinking about how we can, again, prepare our children for the experience that is outside of the norm. And that's going to have a lot of components that we don't necessarily practice regularly. So thinking about how you can kind of bring to life or simulate the event and practice it with your child. This is a strategy that when we work with families, I know Allie and I both have done a lot of this over the years of simulating or role playing and practicing things like getting haircuts, going to the dentist, going to the doctor, some of those events that don't happen regularly for kids and can cause some stress because it's a new environment. And so we'll do things like, practice what a teeth cleaning session would look like at home first. And then, sometimes we're lucky enough, and I'll talk about this with travel in a minute, but to be able to go visit the place that is actually going to occur without any expectations in place. So rather than the day of the dentist appointment, walking into the office and never having been there before, that, we can take our child or, take the family there and just practice sitting in the waiting room, right? And seeing what that's all about. And then taking it to the next step of going into the back office and checking out, what it looks like back there, then sitting in the chair, then, progressively making our way forward. And obviously that's a long-term plan for some of the things that might be more problematic, but it is something that you can do on a smaller scale with things like travel. So we are lucky enough to have a small little airport, not too far away from us. And although it's not going to be like LAX or San Jose, if you're traveling out of there, but it is still an airport where there will be some similarities in terms of the setup and visually for your child to be able to see what sitting in the, the lobby or the waiting area of an airport, seeing planes, take off and land and hearing that noise, getting some exposure to that sensory input as well, and practicing it before it's the actual day, and where, the stakes are a little bit higher of needing to get on a plane. But if you're not able to do that, and not every family might, you can set up a mock airport in your living room. You set out 2 rows of chairs and you practice, sitting in your chair as somebody pushes something through the aisle and ask them if they'd like something to drink. Again, just trying to create some familiarity for your child of what this experience might be like can really help reduce some anxiety. Taking public transportation, if you think you're going to be somewhere without a car, take an Uber from here to Target and back. So again, you can practice that experience. There's a lot of small ways that you can incorporate this in your daily life. Some other things that can be really helpful, I know I use this a lot as a parent, because I do have a child who has some pretty significant anxiety, and this has been a great tool for us, is you can find almost anything on YouTube, to be honest. I even used it myself for a long trip we were taking in a route coming out of Yellowstone, hauling a trailer, and I was not sure how steep or windy the road was. Guess what? Somebody YouTubed the drive from Yellowstone to where I was going. I was able to watch the entire route, and that helped me make some decisions about my route. So things like people going through an airport, people, maybe visiting a special lights display, if that's something you do as a family. If you go to Cambria Lights or something, that there's a YouTube video where people capture what it's like. And so watching that with your child, again, just for that exposure, so they can feel more comfortable about what they might encounter and what they might expect. And it also, depending on, your child's language skills, can be a good opportunity for conversation about what things might potentially make them nervous or cause stress without being in the moment, because in the moment it's obviously much harder for us to communicate those things. And again, going back to having those visual supports in place, and that break plan of okay, if we encounter this light thing that, seems like it might be too much, how are we going to get to our break space? How are we going to be able to stay calm, or maybe avoid that thing altogether? That thing looks a little too, scary. So we're not going to go over to that section of the lights display. We're going to stay over here. So again, just really looking at how you can practice these things. And like Allie mentioned, we do have some resources linked for you at the end. And one of the resources on there, I believe it's the first one on the list, is a great newsletter from Star Autism, who created a tips and resources page for traveling. And they have some great free visual supports that you can print out. And actually, I learned that United Airlines created a social story about taking a plane ride for their passengers with disabilities. So that is linked in there as well, which is a great thing. So we have some things for you guys to reference in addition to what we're talking about. So like Allie mentioned, she stole my thunder a little bit on this slide. Spreading out gifts. So this, again, like Allie mentioned, for some kids, gift giving and receiving, especially all at once, opening things in front of people, or just kind of the chaos that happens on Christmas morning, can be a little much for certain kids. And so thinking about, even though tradition might dictate in your family that you all open your presents on Christmas morning, maybe it's a free-for-all, or maybe you go one at a time. Everybody opens their one gift before it goes back and around in a circle. That if that's not serving your family, it's okay. And thinking about how maybe to choose a different strategy and use this, to fit your family needs better. So the way that Allie was talking about was using your gifts potentially linked to reinforcement and, encouraging that appropriate behavior as you are, going through the holiday season. But it can even be used, non-contingently or not as a reward, and thinking about how you can set your child up for success for some of the things that they're going to experience. So one of the things that happens a lot during holiday activities is waiting. There's a lot of waiting that happens, whether that's, waiting in the car or on the plane during that long travel, waiting and not being able to access your attention for longer periods of time because you're busy cooking the meal or cleaning the house, right? There's so much waiting for kids during holiday activities. So how can you set them up for success? By maybe before you take that car trip to San Diego, you give them a gift so that they have something new and exciting to engage with and hold their attention while in the car. And that can make, those experiences a little bit more positive for them and for you, because they have something fun that they can engage with. Or, again, it's the day of, or the day before, maybe your big event, and you're getting all the things ready. And so you give them a gift on that morning to help them have something fun and new to play with while you're very busy doing all the things that can come with getting ready for some of these special events. So again, just thinking outside of the box about how you can make the things that we are already doing during this time make more sense for your own family. And so lastly, our last tip is pick your traditions. And I think, the whole point of this tip is to really just think about what it is that you are doing as a family, and think about, is it serving your family's needs? So is this something that you want to do for years to come? Allie and I were just chatting, about some of the things that our families, do or don't do. And she mentioned Elf on the Shelf. So Elf on the Shelf is great. And everybody's like, yay, Elf on the Shelf, right? For like year one. And then by year 4, they're like, why on earth did I choose to start Elf on the Shelf? I'm running out of ideas of where to hide this elf, what to have this elf do. And not only that, if you have multiple children, Allie's got 3 kids, then there's an age span there. You have to continue this on until your youngest, right, is old enough to maybe know what's going on with Elf on the Shelf. So a little bit of pre-thought might be a good idea, as a parent. Again, is this something that I want to commit to and that I'm willing to like put in the work to do for my kids for years to come? And if you are an Elf on the Shelf lover and think, yes, this sounds great, then great. I chose not to do it because I did not want to be chained to Elf on the Shelf for the next 10 years of my life. Another thing to think about is, does it serve your family well? Is it something that is bringing something to your family, or is the tradition part of your family's routine because it's something that's just always been done and you feel like you have to do, right? It's hard to make a conscious choice to not do something or to discontinue a tradition that maybe, you grew up doing and it's been, generations in your family or something like that. There's a lot of like external pressure and, we don't want to disappoint our family. But just giving it some thought, again, is this adding to what is, enhancing the celebration for this holiday of your family, or is it just something that you feel obligated to do? And more so than that, does it align with the needs of your child? Because a lot of these traditions, maybe that worked for your family when you were a child, they don't match with what the needs of your family is, right? There may not have been a child, with special needs in your family, and now there is. And so it's okay, right? Things change and that is okay. So really just stopping and giving yourself some time to think about that and about what you want those traditions to look like for your own family and based on your own children's needs. So kind of along that same line, we are focusing during these holidays as parents on what really matters, expectations versus reality. I think the holidays are wonderful for most people. They, are wrapped up with, again, traditions and decorations and gifts and celebration. But there also is this expectation that I know I put on myself. I know Allie does, because we had conversations about this, about how we want it to go. And Allie even said, that expectation of we're going to go do this as a family and it's going to be fun, and it's a total disaster. So, right, just knowing that that is true for all families, not just your family. And that isn't specific to, oh, you have a child with autism or you have a child with special needs, and that's why this doesn't work, or that's why this just did not go as planned. That happens for all families. Okay. And just knowing that that is probably more the norm than everything being picture perfect and working out exactly as we thought it was in our own head. And then again, just really thinking about and prioritizing what works for you and your family. That's really what we're talking about, right? We want you to feel empowered to make those choices and use the tools that we just went through to set up a holiday season that works for you and works for your family and meets the needs of your child and you as the parent. And to give yourself permission to let go of the things that don't add that value or joy, just to this, we tried this, it didn't work. We're not going to do that anymore. And that's okay. Or my family, I grew up doing it this way, but that doesn't really add anything for my children or for me as a parent. It just creates more stress. We're going to let that go, and giving yourself the okay to do that. And we have to do that as parents, right? A lot. And it's okay to do that during this time as well. I really liked this quote. You can insert whatever holiday here it is that we're talking about or that you celebrate. But again, just that reminder, Christmas is not a time or a season, but a state of mind. And for me, that means it's not about the traditions or the things that you quote have to do, right? Or that is dictated to us that Christmas should be. It's what it is for us and our family. And if that means that it's ordering Panda Express and eating takeout on Christmas, Eve, instead of doing some fancy dinner with candles and everybody dressed up in uncomfortable clothes, that's awesome, right? That works for your family. That's great. It needs to be whatever it is for you, and that is fine. So lastly, wrapping it up, just some reminders. Again, planning ahead goes a long way. So all the things that Allie and I talked about, maybe some of them were new information for you. I'm sure that some of it really wasn't, but the whole point is just thinking ahead and having a plan of attack before you kind of get stuck in the moment. That can make for such a different holiday season for you and reduce the number of those bumps in the road. It's not going to take them all away. There's still going to be some, right? But it really can help you minimize those, hopefully those moments of stress for you and for your child. And having a perfect holiday is not the standard. I know that this is something I need to be reminded of myself regularly. Unfortunately, social media, I feel like, poisons our brain to think like we have to have this like picture perfect, Instagram worthy family Christmas with matching jammies and all the matching decor and this activity and that activity. No, I'm sorry, that's not reality, right? And that is not the standard. That is not the majority. That is not what how people are really living their lives. And so I need to tell myself that reminder. So I'm reminding you too. And the other reminder, I think, is honestly, sometimes the things that blow up or don't go as we expected are when we learn the most about how to plan better next time or how to make some changes for the next time so that we are more prepared or things do go smoothly or we are more now aware of a need of our child that we didn't consider in this context. And so not feeling frustrated or sort of disgruntled with things that maybe don't turn out to be as we expected or picture perfect, that taking those lessons from that can really be helpful and sort of embracing those disasters for what we learned from them, right? So like Allie mentioned and I mentioned, we tried to link some hopefully valuable resources for you guys. There's a few here. The first one is that newsletter about traveling that I mentioned that has multiple resources in it, including that social story from United Airlines about flying, some free visual supports for the home. So that has visual schedules, reinforcement systems. It has just a lot of visuals related to like daily routines and activities. So it's got some great resources there. So you're not having to come up with things on your own. They don't have to be fancy, but this maybe can be a tool for you. A video that Allie and I both like and we try and incorporate whenever we can, just about how powerful visual supports can be. And I think it's nice to watch that because we talk a lot about visual supports and the power of visual supports. Preparing your children for school breaks and some resources there about keeping routine and how you can really help that time where everything is sort of disrupted more consistent and hopefully smooth. And then like Allie mentioned, some sensory friendly inclusive Santa experiences. So if, visiting Santa is something you want to do, it can obviously be a little challenging for some kids. Here are some other options that might be helpful for you as a family. And that's it. Any questions for us?
Feel free. I'm going to stop the recording real quick.